Hello there, Force of Will players, and welcome back to another Wander Wednesday. This week, I'm going to be bringing you something that I worked on a little bit when we were preparing for the most recent American Wander Grand Prix. It was something that I thought someone was going to bring, so I didn't release it as early as I wanted to, but they ended up not bringing it, and the event's over anyway. So, that is what I'll be bringing you this week. And what it is a Loki deck list. A Order Loki deck list, mind you. So, Loki, Master of Trickery, Order of Trickery. And so what this deck is, what we designed this deck to do, was we call it Pre-Game or Turn Zero Loki. So what it is when a game initially begins, there is still priority steps within a draw phase, and then into the main phase. There is no recovery phase in the first step of the game, basically. So each player's first turn, there is no real recovery. So that means that mana carries through the whole first turn, right? It'll go away at the end step, so it's not like it carries into your turn, right? If you do stuff turn zero. But it also allows you to maybe potentially get mana early and then keep it for potential interaction like through your opponent. So what are we doing? And how are we playing stuff turn zero? So, of course, this is designed to go second. It is designed for you to have the coin, or energize, or whatever you want to describe it as. And Loki has blue, green, and darkness energize. So, how the lines work is you play Loki enters the Game of Gods, and that will produce you 1 mana of any color, you draw a card, and then it gives all resonators in your hand quick cast. After that, you use this to filter into a green. Typically, this is like the lines. And then you play Dinner Time in order to go up to 3 green mana. With that 3 green mana, you either play a Shahrazad, Weaver of Fairy Tales, or you play a Magna's Guardian Beast. If you have to play the Magna's Guardian Beast, you have to play a Melfi first in order to filter into red, obviously. However, you play one of these options, and then you also simultaneously order it. You technically don't have to order it, but you can. And having the option to just have the flip of Loki and shoot something is just pretty decent. So typically you'll order it. And you're doing this all typically in your opponent's draw phase, before they can call a stone, before they can do pretty much anything, right? Their ruler would have to have some kind of automatic effect in the draw phase or at the beginning of game in order for them to do anything to stop you, or to get mana, or they'd have to have a 0 mana play line or something like that. So with Shahrazad, Weaver, Fairy Tales, or Magna's Guardian Beast gets you 2 1-drop resonators. Shahrazad gets you a 1-drop resonator, as well as a 1-drop addition. Within the CR, it doesn't exist yet, but we have had confirmation that it will be in the next CR. The location and play cards and abilities in which you determine whether or not you are ordering a card. Ordering occurs before awakening, which means that you can choose to order a card and then choose to awaken it. So for cards like Shahrazad, cards like Darksphere, other cards that say rest a recovered J-Ruler you control for the awakening, even though your ruler would be rested at the time after you've performed order, really, so the resonator is going on to the chase, right? It's still legal for you to perform order, because you declare that you're performing order and everything is legal at that time, and then you pay for the awakening cost. So you've already declared order, and then awakening is paid for. It doesn't just make it invalid anymore. So you are allowed to do that. So with that, you then play a slew of... In Yu-Gi-Oh! They're referred to as Floodgates. I think most people who come from Yu-Gi-Oh! Or other card games also refer to them as Floodgates here, and that's what I'll be referring to them as. What they are is they're just passive field effects that prevent your opponent from doing things. And so what are the passive field effects? Well, it's all the 1-ofs down at the bottom of this list, and a couple of the 2-ofs. So we have Academy Guard of Lycian, one of the more prevalent Floodgates we've had in the past. Each player may only play 1 resonator, each player may only play 1 chant, right? And you lock your opponent into a single card per turn. Dark Sun, it has a banishing effect, so sometimes maybe you do want to wait for your opponent to call a stone and try to play something before you do this like turn 0 play line, right? You do get the banish effect, but because you're Loki, you also get the effect of your opponent cannot pay any costs that include banishing an entity. Shackles of Ice. You can use Shackles of Ice to stop your opponent from using ruler activate abilities. Mistletoe, the Darksword Saint. You prevent non-will activate abilities of other J resonators that are in play. Witch of the Fallen Kingdom, you prevent your opponent from searching their deck. Exorcist Mage, if a resonator would be put into the field without being played, you remove it from the game. Wall of Terror is less of a floodgate and more just of a protection tool, right? So if, let's say, you play Magna's Guardian Beast, you know that your opponent's on some deck that really revolves around using activate abilities on the field or something like that. You can Magna's Guardian Beast, get a Mistletoe and a Wall of Terror, so you can protect your Mistletoe while it's preventing your opponent from playing the game effectively, right? So those are all that. Going up one, so the two Keep the Faith. Keep the Faith just gets back all of these cards. They're all 1-drops, right? Because that's what they have to be for Magna's Guardian Beast and Shahrazad. And so Keep the Faith will allow you to pull them from your grave should your opponent deal with them. So it's a way to get back your Floodgates and play a kind of control game as you slowly chip away at your opponent. Vomal. Vomal is another option that you can get off of Magna's Guardian Beast and Shahrazad. The main reason why I have it in the deck is because it draws 3 cards. It's just, it's your value engine, pretty much. That's really the main reason that I included Vomal. And then Lorite and Garyon, these are the counterspells of choice for the deck. The reason I don't have Fair spells in here is because of Dinner Time. I wanted to keep the chant count as low as possible, but still have more like impactful chants, right? So Loki enters the Game of Gods, you have to give Resonators quick cast. Dinner Time you need to have to get to that mana value. And then Keep the Faith is just a really good tech option because it just brings back every single one of your Floodgates, right? Like every single one. It does also bring back Lorite. But then Lorite can play into Dinner Time, Garyon can play into Dinner Time. And let's say you don't draw like Magna's Guardian Beast Shahrazad, but maybe you draw like your Mistletoe, you draw a Witch of the Fallen Kingdom, and like you draw a Melfi or something like that, right? Like there's a chance that you could just filter the mana into these Floodgates themselves, in which case you might still have mana left over for Garyon or Lorite going into your opponent's actual turn, right? Because it won't filter out at the recovery phase on their first turn, since there is no first turn recovery phase. And so that is how this deck was designed. The original iteration of this deck, funnily enough, came in the form of it being a Gwyber turbo deck. That was what we played. So if you look at cards like Dolly that produce mana, Wind Servant of Ragnarok produces mana on play, and then you take cards like Adam Brawley and stuff like that. Spirit of Knowledge adds a 5-drop or higher from your deck to your hand, so you can add stuff like Garyon, stuff like Gwyber, so on and so forth. And then you can like Adam Brawley combo and put a bunch of Gwybers into play, and then the idea was you put enough damage into play where you tell your opponent like, hey, use your 1 mana to answer my whole board or lose. So that was the original iteration of this deck, but the consistency between having to draw a bunch of Gwybers and all these tools like Magna's Guardian Beast and Shahrazad and Dinner Time and Melfi and Loki Enters the Game of Gods, it just became too inconsistent. Whereas this really only requires 1, 2, 3 potential cards, 1, 2, 3 other maybe Floodgates, 1, 2, 3, 4 cards, right? So you get to have a little bit of leeway with a more consistent game plan, right? Looking at the Stone deck, Magic Stone and Moonshade, no reason not to. You're not really caring about your life, right? Deepwood, your 2 predominant colors are going to be blue and green for Dinner Time and Loki Enters the Game of Gods, as well as just your interaction and the main cards that you're playing. And then Ataroctia's Memoria, same kind of concept. It's just like another blue-green stone. It can also produce black, so like Witch of the Fallen Kingdom, Dark Sun, etc., stuff like that. Garyon's Destruction activated effect. However, do keep in mind that if you do order a card such as Shahrazad, Ataroctia's Memoria will only produce green mana because it's producing off of the J ruler that you now have, which only is 1 attribute instead of the 3 that Loki would be. Other potential options that you can put into the deck that I just haven't done, if you're scared of like Alice or anything like that, you can look at Barrier of Shadows. They have to tap, they have to pay 1 in order to use any activated effects on Regalia. Makes other older ruler, like non-order rulers, pay more to Judgment. So that's an option. Ma'at, the the card. I don't like. Why can't I think of the set? Gog in Game of Gods, the first Game of Gods mod. Draws you a card, has Mythic, prevents Tails and Villains from taking damage from non-Tails and Villains. Your opponent does more to Judgment. It's like kind of like another Barrier of Shadows, just doesn't affect Regalia. You could play like a Spirit of Knowledge, right, to search like a Garyon. Like one of the other lines, if you have to do Loki, Dinner Time, Melfi, Guardian Beast, and like you have like Gary or Lorite in your hand, Guardian Beast can search like a Windservant of Ragnarok you could put in the deck. That'll let you produce a green mana, and then you can have interaction on your opponent's turn, right? There's nothing stopping them from just passing, at which point the mana will filter away, but that is like another option that you can add to this deck. So, the thing with this is any 1-mana additions, any 1-mana resonators that you want to try and play, if you want to try and do the Adam Brawley lines in order to generate more cards and stuff like that, all of that is playable. It's a very fun, kind of dynamic, different type of deck style that you can play. And again, because you're doing it on turn 0, before your opponent can even play, there's a lot of value to that, right? Now, do you keep in mind, there is one kind of archetype that can play into this and potentially stop you from doing stuff, and that is any deck that is playing Umar Phantasmal Ascendant, much like a few of the topping lists that we saw at the most recent NA Wanderer GP. Umar Phantasmal Ascendant, right, gives you the mana for Phantasmal Ascendant. Phantasmal Ascendant gets you a stone that lets you do some form of interaction, and then if you try and do anything, you'll be out of interaction. So do keep that in mind, that play line exists. But otherwise, I think this deck is really fun. It's kind of like a fun, kind of different control style, set the board and then kind of say deal with it. Very akin to Mystic Mine in my mind for Yu-Gi-Oh! If you are familiar with that. So if you like decks like that, you'll definitely enjoy this deck. If you hate decks like that, you'll hate me for putting this list out there. But that's just how it will be. Anyway, that's it for the deck for this week. Tomorrow I will be releasing a tournament report for the NAGP that we had. And then this Friday, I'll be doing my first look at the spoilers that we have had released over the past week and a half as of that point. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.